A castle was more than just a fortress of stone. It was a giant clock, built to tell time with shadows. Medieval architects secretly wove calendars into the very fabric of their strongest buildings, using the sun as their power source. By the end of this journey, you will never look at a crumbling castle wall the same way again. We will uncover how a simple beam of light falling on a specific stone could announce a change in season or signal the start of a royal feast. What hidden messages did these master builders leave in the light and shadow? This cosmic order began not with grand towers, but with a simple line drawn on the ground. The sun's journey was the master blueprint. For months, even years, builders would watch the horizon, marking exactly where the sun rose and set on the most important days of the year. The longest day, the summer solstice, and the equal nights of the equinoxes were their key coordinates. They were not just placing a building, they were anchoring it to the universe itself. The primary axis of the entire castle, the long spine of the Great Hall or the central line of the mighty keep, was then carefully aligned to these solar events. This was the most critical step. It transformed the entire structure from a random pile of stone into a precision instrument. Think of this alignment as setting the hands on a clock face to 12 o'clock. Without that initial perfect calibration, none of the finer details would ever tell the correct time. Historian Dr. Elena Vance explains that this was driven by stark necessity. In an age before pocket watches, the entire community, from the lord to the lowest farmer, relied on the sun. The castle's alignment provided a shared, undeniable rhythm for planting crops, for holding religious services, and for governing daily life. It embedded a silent, celestial order directly into the secular and sacred heart of the fortress. This foundational choice made the castle walls themselves into a giant, immovable sundial, a silent guardian of the hours and the seasons. Once the castle's spine was aligned to the cosmos, its architects turned to the entrance. The main gatehouse became more than a defensive choke point. It was transformed into a solsticial gateway, a monumental instrument for marking the year's extremes. Picture the longest day of the year, the summer solstice. As the sun reaches its highest, most northern point in the sky, its light would not just fall upon the castle walls, it would be channeled. The architects designed the gate passage so that the sun's rays at this precise moment would align perfectly with the main archway. A shaft of brilliant light would pierce the shadowy tunnel, often striking a specific stone carving, a coat of arms, or a Chinese letter set into the inner wall. This was a public spectacle, a visible announcement of the sun's peak power, witnessed by all who passed through. It signaled the start of the harvest season, a time of warmth and abundance. But the same gateway held a message for the depths of winter. On the shortest day, the winter solstice, the sun would hang low and far to the south. Now its light would enter at a shallow angle, perhaps through a narrow arrow slit designed for this very purpose. This thin, precise beam would creep along the floor of the passage, reaching a marked stone or a specific crack deep inside the gatehouse. This touch of light in the deepest dark was a promise. It declared that the sun's retreat was over and the slow climb back to longer days had begun. For a medieval community, this was vital knowledge, a built-in reassurance that the cold would not last forever. The gatehouse, therefore, was a threshold in time as well as space. It did not just separate the outside world from the inner court. It separated one season from the next, marking the turning points of the year for everyone, from the lord returning from a hunt to the servant carrying firewood. This horizontal alignment was just the beginning. The true genius of these shadow clocks would soon reach for the sky, using the castle's tallest structures to slice the day into precise, manageable hours. But the grand solar alignments of the gatehouse were only part of the story. The true heartbeat of daily life was measured in the cool, dark silence of the castle keep. Here, within walls thick enough to withstand a siege, a different kind of precision was at work. High up on a south-facing wall, a narrow vertical slit, no wider than a finger, was cut with meticulous care. This was not for defense or for archers. It was a meridian instrument, a laser beam of medieval engineering. Its sole purpose was to capture one moment, the most important moment of the day, local solar noon, when the sun reached its absolute peak in the sky. At that exact instant, a brilliant sliver of light would pierce the interior gloom. It would fall as a sharp, defined line upon the stone floor or the opposite wall, landing directly on a groove that had been carved there for this very reason. This was the noon mark. In a world without accurate clocks, this was the official time signal for the entire castle. The changing of the guard, the sounding of an alarm, the calling of the Lord's court to order, all could be synchronized to this daily event. It was the most reliable timepiece they had, a built-in atomic clock of its era, and this mark was not static. A careful watchman would notice that the position of the light spot changed with the seasons. Over the course of a year, the dot of light would trace a subtle but distinct pattern on the floor, a narrow figure-8 path known today as an annulma. This meant that a skilled observer, someone who knew the castle's secret language, could not only tell the time of day from that single slit, but could also estimate the time of year. The shifting mark revealed whether it was the height of summer or the depth of winter. This simple yet brilliant device demonstrates a level of solar understanding that we often underestimate. It turned tons of inert stone into a living, breathing calendar and clock, all powered by a single beam of light. But the most public timekeeping was yet to come, written large across the castle's own body for everyone to see. While the keep's narrow slit captured the single, critical moment of noon, the Great Hall was designed for a grander, more public display of time. As the bustling heart of castle life, this vast chamber became a seasonal sundial on a monumental scale. Its high windows were not merely for light or air. They were placed with astronomical precision, acting as lenses to project the sun's journey directly onto the floor of daily activity. Throughout the long day and across the turning year, broad beams of light would travel slowly across the stone floor, painting a silent, moving clock face for all to see. But this was no ordinary clock. Its markers were not numbers but the most important dates on the medieval calendar. A particular flagstone might only be fully bathed in light on the morning of the spring equinox, signaling the time to begin plowing the fields. A cherished tapestry depicting a saint or the Lord's own high table might be illuminated by a unique, dappled pattern on that saint's feast day. This architectural choreography turned every communal event into a ceremony synchronized with the cosmos. A great banquet would not simply be called for sundown. Instead, servants might be instructed to begin serving the first course the very moment a specific shadow, cast by a window arch, touched the base of a certain carved pillar. This was more than a practical timekeeping method. It was a subtle yet profound form of power. By building this celestial rhythm into the very room where he held court, the Lord demonstrated his command over not just his lands and people, but over time itself. His authority was woven into the sunlight, making the natural order of the universe a part of his rule. This public synchronization of social life with the solar cycle leads us from the crowded hall to the more private spaces of the castle, where timekeeping took on a deeply personal dimension. Yet beyond the public spectacle of the Great Hall, the sun's secret language was spoken in whispers. In the Lord's private solar and the quiet solitude of the chapel, architects created personal observatories. Here, the windows were not broad openings for general illumination but precisely engineered instruments. They were narrow with deeply splayed sides, like a funnel designed to capture not just any light, but one specific, meaningful beam. The goal was to catch the first golden light of dawn on a single, significant morning of the year. This could be the feast day of the castle's patron saint, a day of special prayer and celebration. Or it might be the anniversary of a great battle victory, a personal triumph that cemented the Lord's power and legacy. Imagine the Lord waking in his chamber. On that one morning, a sharp, focused ray of sunlight would pierce the dim room, falling with unerring accuracy upon the open page of his prayer book or illuminating a cherished religious icon set into the wall. This was not an accident. It was a built-in miracle, a daily reaffirmation of divine favor and earthly authority experienced in the most intimate setting. In the chapel, the same principle transformed personal devotion. A shaft of light might only touch the altar cross on the morning of Easter, or illuminate a specific stained glass depiction of a saint on their feast day. For the medieval mind, this was a direct communication, a sign that their prayers were aligned with the cosmos itself. These private solar events were intimate calendars, marking personal and liturgical time with a quiet precision that was inaccessible to the general populace. This personalized timekeeping reveals how chronology was woven into the very fabric of lordship and spirituality. But the need to mark time did not stop at the boundaries of faith and private life. It was also a matter of survival, etched into the castle's strongest defensive features. This integration of time into the very act of movement reveals the architect's ultimate goal. Even the simple act of climbing a staircase was an opportunity to mark the passage of the sun. The spiral staircases that twist through castle towers, celebrated for their defensive advantages, held a quieter secret. Their design was not solely about conserving space or giving a right-handed defender the upper hand. The central stone column, the newel post around which the steps curl, acted as the gnomon of a giant helical sundial. As the sun traveled across the sky, the shadow cast by this post would spiral slowly down the staircase, a dark hand sweeping across a stone clock face. Where the shadow's edge met a particular step could signal the hour of the day to anyone passing by. This was a timepiece built into the rhythm of daily life, a constant reminder of the sun's position every time a servant carried a meal upstairs or a knight descended to the courtyard. But the annual calendar was also inscribed within the stairwell. A narrow window positioned at a precise angle might only allow a beam of light to penetrate deep into the stairwell on one specific morning of the year. On the summer solstice, for example, this beam could strike a unique carving on the third turn of the staircase, a hidden anniversary known only to the castle's inhabitants. This transforms our understanding of these structures. No element was merely functional. Every ascent and descent became a silent, subconscious interaction with a cosmic clock, making the castle itself a living, breathing chronometer. Even the castle's jagged crown, its battlements and parapets, served a double purpose beyond deflecting arrows. The alternating pattern of solid merlons and open crenels was engineered to cast what are known as mnemonic shadows, shadows that actively tell time. As the sun arced across the sky, it transformed this defensive silhouette into a giant, slowly moving clock hand. For a guard patrolling the high wall walks, time was not a mystery. He could glance down and see the sharp edge of a shadow creeping across the stone. A specific crack or a worn mark on the pathway, seemingly random to an outsider, would align with that shadow's edge to signal the mid-morning watch or the approach of noon. This was a timekeeping system built into the very path of his duty, a constant, silent companion. But the story these shadows told changed with the seasons. In the high, strong sun of summer, the shadows were short and compact, their movement brisk. As the year waned and the sun hung lower, the shadows stretched long and thin, their pace across the courtyard slowing dramatically. A seasoned observer could therefore gauge not only the hour but also the rough time of year, understanding that the long, lazy shadows meant the harvest was near or that the deep cold of winter was setting in. This turned the entire rooftop defense system into a public clock, its face painted in light and dark across the open spaces below. Anyone in the courtyard, from a blacksmith to a stable hand, could look up and read the time from the castle's own silhouette. It was a form of democratized time, a shared rhythm for the entire community, achieved centuries before mechanical clocks would bring timekeeping to the masses. This elegant, solar-powered network reveals a castle not as a cold fortress, but as a living organism breathing in time with the heavens. Yet the castle's dialogue with the sun was not confined to its stone walls alone. The very moat that formed its primary line of defense also played a role in this celestial symphony. While its deep, still waters were a formidable barrier against siege towers and tunneling, they offered a second, more subtle function. On a calm day, the moat's surface became a vast, liquid mirror, a reflective canvas that amplified the castle's timekeeping abilities. Sunlight striking the water would not simply be absorbed. Instead, it would bounce upward, projecting dynamic, shimmering patterns of light onto the undersides of the drawbridge, the arch of the gatehouse, and the weathered stone of the curtain walls. These were not static images, they were alive, constantly shifting with the sun's movement across the sky. This effect was most pronounced during the morning and evening hours, when the sun hung low on the horizon. At these times, the shallow angle of light created long, dramatic reflections that danced across the castle's underbelly. A guard standing on the wall at dawn might watch a specific patch of light creep along the damp stone beneath the gatehouse, its arrival at a particular crack signaling the official start of the day watch. This created a living, liquid clock that interacted in a beautiful synergy with the immovable stone above. It highlights the medieval architect's genius for finding multiple, layered purposes for every single feature. Even an element designed for pure, elemental defense was seamlessly integrated into the daily and seasonal rhythm of the fortress. The moat did not just keep enemies out. It helped the castle tell time, proving that every part of the structure, from its highest tower to its watery foundations, was part of a single, coherent chronological machine. But these cosmic clocks were not just about abstract lines of light. The castle's stone skin itself was a canvas for storytelling. Intricate carvings of zodiac signs, mythical beasts, and saints were far more than mere decoration. Each sculpture was a piece of a grand, celestial puzzle. The placement of a lion, representing the constellation Leo, was a deliberate calculation. On the specific days when the sun journeyed through that part of the sky, a beam of light would be timed to sweep across the carving, bringing the stone beast to life in a blaze of solar glory. This was astronomy made visible, a direct link between the constellations above and the art on the walls. Similarly, a deeply carved image of a patron saint would be positioned to catch the first or last light on their official feast day. For the medieval observer, this was not a coincidence. It was a miracle engineered in stone, a sign of divine favor that connected the sacred calendar to the Lord's own domain. This practice fused art, faith, and precise science into a single, breathtaking language. The castle walls became a narrative calendar, telling the stories of the year through the silent, majestic movement of light and shadow. An illiterate farmer might not be able to read a manuscript, but he could understand the message when the sun ignited a harvest symbol on the first day of autumn. It was a form of public education and inspiration, a way of encoding the rhythms of the universe into the very fabric of daily life. This symbolic layer reveals the ultimate ambition of the castle architects. They were not just building a fortress to withstand armies. They were constructing a worldview, a complete model of the cosmos where heaven and earth, myth and reality, time and eternity, were all perfectly aligned in stone and light. Behind every solsticial gateway and every whispering window slit stood a single, remarkable individual, the Master Mason. He was the living key to this entire system, a man whose mind held the secret maps of the sun. Far more than a simple stone carver, he was a true Renaissance man centuries before the Renaissance, a fusion of architect, structural engineer, and practical astronomer. His most vital knowledge, the precise formulas for solar alignment, was not written in any book that could be easily stolen or lost. Instead, it was protected within the closed world of the Masons' Guild, passed from master to apprentice as a sacred trust. This oral tradition was called a mystery, not because it was incomprehensible, but because it was a specialized craft secret, the exclusive property of the guild. To learn it, an apprentice would spend years not just cutting stone, but also watching the horizon, internalizing the sun's slow dance until he could predict its path by instinct. His toolkit for this cosmic surveying was deceptively simple. With a gnomon, just a vertical rod stuck in the ground, he could trace the sun's shadow throughout the day, mapping its arc with pebbles and string. With an astrolabe, a sophisticated brass calculator for the stars, he could measure the exact angle of the sun above the horizon on any given day. Using these humble instruments on a barren building site, the Master Mason would perform the geometry that would dictate the castle's orientation for 1,000 years. His calculations were not theoretical. They were born of relentless, hands-on observation, a deep empirical wisdom that was stunningly accurate. He knew that a miscalculation of a single degree in laying the foundation would mean that a century later, the winter solstice sun would miss its mark entirely, rendering the castle's celestial clock useless. This human element is the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. It reminds us that the castle's secret chronology was not a fortunate accident, not a result of stones settling into place over time. It was the deliberate, intelligent work of a genius whose name history has often forgotten, a man who literally built the movements of the heavens into the heart of his earthly fortress. The silent calculations of the Master Mason find their ultimate expression in the stone and mortar of Conway Castle. Perched on the coast of Wales, this fortress was a masterpiece of both military might and celestial design, built by the powerful King Edward I to dominate the landscape. Its two immense great halls, the heart of its administrative power, were laid out with precision on a perfect east-west axis. This was no arbitrary decision. On the mornings of the spring and autumn equinox, when day and night are of equal length, the rising sun performs a spectacular ritual. Its light pours directly through the eastern windows, flooding the entire length of the hall with a brilliant, level beam that reaches deep into the chamber. For anyone standing inside, it was as if the sun itself was marching down the hall, a visible declaration of cosmic order imposed by the king who claimed to rule by divine right. But the solar choreography did not end in the public space. In the king's own private apartments, the windows were engineered for a more personal chronology. Specific openings were angled to capture the midday sun not on a generic holiday, but on dates of profound significance to Edward himself. One window might be designed so that a shaft of light would fall upon his reading desk or a particular tapestry on the anniversary of a key military victory, a yearly reminder of his power. Another might mark the feast day of a saint he held in special reverence, aligning his private devotions with the heavens. This transforms Conway from a mere fortress into a biographical monument in light and shadow. It proves that these principles were not just theoretical or reserved for obscure locations. They were applied deliberately in one of the most strategically important and expensively built castles of the medieval period. The intentional alignment of Conway's halls and chambers shows that shadow-based chronology was a sophisticated and widespread practice, a tool used by the most powerful rulers to weave their authority into the very fabric of the universe. Yet the sun's dominion over the castle's timekeeping was not absolute. When dusk fell and the solar clock fell silent, a softer, more mysterious light took its turn. The moon, with its ever-changing face, was also woven into the castle's secret chronology. While less precise than the sun, the lunar cycle was vital for tracking the passage of months and for scheduling events that pulsed to a different rhythm. Certain religious festivals, pilgrimages, and even the optimal times for planting specific crops were governed by the moon. To accommodate this, architects designed special apertures, often narrower and more carefully angled than their solar counterparts. A slender window high in a chapel tower or a tiny opening in the thickness of an outer wall might be aligned not with the sun's predictable path, but with the rising point of the full moon on a key night of the year. On that night, a beam of ethereal, silvery light would pierce the interior darkness, falling upon a Chinese letter, a particular fresco, or a marked stone on the floor. This ghostly illumination transformed the castle into a nocturnal observatory. For the inhabitants, it was a tangible link to the celestial rhythms that continued even in the absence of the sun. Imagine a monk keeping vigil in the chapel. The sudden appearance of this cool light on a sacred symbol, arriving exactly when predicted, would have felt like a divine confirmation, a silent communication from the heavens. This lunar marking system completed the castle's function as a true 24-hour chronometer. It was no longer just a sundial that went blind at night. It was a living entity that breathed in time with both the brilliant sun and the reflective moon, its stone heart beating to the dual pulse of the cosmos. This seamless integration of both great lights of the sky reveals the ultimate ambition of the medieval mind, a desire to live in perfect, unbroken harmony with the universe itself. This monastic obsession with time did not remain locked behind cloister walls. It flowed outward, shaping the very stones of secular power. The rigid schedule of the canonical hours, from matins in the dead of night to vespers at dusk, required a precision that castle builders eagerly adopted. Monks had perfected the art of simple solar markers, a notch on a windowsill or a line on the chapel floor that would catch the light at the exact moment a prayer was due. This signal would prompt the ringing of the bell, calling the community to devotion. Castle lords saw the immense practical value in this system. They replaced the call to prayer with the call to arms or the call to court. The same principle that told a monk to sing vespers could tell a guard to change his watch. A narrow window in the castle's great tower might be aligned not for a saint's day, but to cast a sliver of light on a specific stone at the hour when the garrison's duty roster changed. This was a direct translation of sacred time into civic and military time. The castle's timekeeping became a tool for managing a large household, for mustering troops efficiently, and for projecting an image of unshakable order. This cross-pollination reveals a profound truth. The drive to measure and master time was a unifying force in the medieval world, bridging the gap between the spiritual rhythm of the monastery and the practical demands of the fortress. It was a shared language of power written in sunlight and shadow. This silent, strategic clock transformed the castle's own shadow into a weapon, A guard commander standing atop the high walls did not need a sundial. His timepiece was the creeping darkness cast by the Great Western Tower. He knew that when the sharp edge of that shadow touched a specific, slightly darker stone halfway across the outer bailey, the sun would set in precisely 1 hour. This was the signal to double the watch along the curtain walls, a critical tactical routine timed to the minute by the architecture itself. As twilight deepened, the castle's defensive posture tightened in perfect sync with the fading light, an automated response built from stone and sky. This was defense by chronology. The same principle governed the longer arc of the year. The commander also watched the shadows for seasonal intelligence. In the high summer, the tower's shadow at noon was a stumpy, condensed pool around its base. But as autumn progressed, he would note how that same midday shadow began to stretch, reaching farther each day like a slow, pointing finger. When it finally touched the granary door, it was an unmistakable command. The message was clear. The time for harvesting was over. The season of short days and long nights was approaching, and the castle must begin stockpiling supplies for a potential winter siege. This was more than just observation. It was a built-in early warning system. The castle did not simply react to the seasons. It anticipated them, using the predictable, lengthening path of its own shadow to schedule essential preparations weeks in advance. This integration of cosmic timing with earthly defense reveals a profound understanding of warfare. A strong wall was useless if the garrison inside was hungry, cold, or caught unprepared at the changing of the guard. The master masons ensured that the castle itself would remind its defenders of their duties, turning the inevitable progression of the sun into a relentless, silent sergeant major. Mastering this solar geometry meant predicting two specific measurements with absolute precision. The first is the sun's azimuth, its position along the horizon from north to east to south to west. The second is its altitude, the steepness of its climb into the sky. Think of it this way: azimuth is the direction you must face to see the sun. Altitude is how high you must then tilt your head to look directly at it. Both of these angles are in constant, predictable motion. The sun's path is not a random arc. It is a precise, mathematical curve that shifts with the seasons. A master mason did not just hope for the best. He knew that on the morning of the summer solstice, the sun would rise at a specific compass point, say 58 degrees east of north, and would reach a maximum altitude of 61 degrees at noon. He then used this data like a master programmer. By carving a window slit at an exact height and angle, he was writing a simple command into the stone. If the sun's altitude is 61 degrees and its azimuth is due south, then a beam of light will pass through this opening and strike that specific stone. This was a conditional statement built in granite. It was a machine that responded to the cosmos with flawless accuracy. This required a deep understanding of spherical geometry, the mathematics of the celestial sphere. These builders were not merely stacking rocks. They were calculating angles and trajectories in 3 dimensions, solving problems that would later form the basis of modern astronomy and navigation. Their work proves that the so-called Dark Ages were, in fact, illuminated by a brilliant and practical scientific light, a light they captured and set in stone for eternity. The castle's shadow was the official start date for the harvest. Across the sprawling lands controlled by a great fortress, the economic survival of thousands depended on perfect timing. A week too early and the grain would be unripe. A week too late and autumn rains could destroy the entire crop. The Lord Steward, the administrator of the estate, did not rely on guesswork or a farmer's almanac. His most trusted calendar was built into the castle walls. From a specific window in the great tower, he would watch for the moment when the late summer sun, at its appointed altitude, cast a shadow whose edge touched a particular, perhaps slightly discolored, stone in the center of the inner courtyard. That was the signal. Messengers would then be dispatched to every village proclaiming that the reaping could begin. This single architectural feature synchronized the labor of an entire region, turning a play of light and stone into a command that put scythes to wheat. This system extended throughout the agricultural year. The same principles that marked the solstices for ceremony were used to dictate the brutal pragmatism of farming. A beam of light entering the great hall and striking the base of a certain column might signal the time for the first spring plowing. The appearance of a distinct shadow pattern on a stairwell could announce the date for tenants to bring their livestock down from the high pastures before the first snows. For the medieval mind, this was the ultimate expression of order. The cosmos dictated the rhythm, the castle interpreted it, and the land obeyed. It embedded the Lord's authority into the most fundamental cycle of life itself. His power was not just demonstrated by the knights in his hall, but by the very sun that made the crops grow. This was governance by astronomy, a silent administration that ensured the castle was not just a fortress, but the beating heart of a self-sustaining world. This silent governance by sunlight, however, would soon meet a formidable rival. The steady tick of a mechanical clock introduced a new kind of time, one that was portable, predictable, and utterly indifferent to clouds. By the 14th century, these intricate machines of gears and weights began their ascent into the steeples of cathedrals and the towers of town halls, their bells ringing out the hours with a regularity that the sun, hidden behind fog or storms, could not always guarantee. This was time democratized and made constant, no longer anchored to a single, immovable fortress but carried on the air for all to hear. The castle's great stone calendar, for all its genius, had a fundamental weakness. It fell silent at night, and on overcast days, the mechanical clock never slept. Yet the ancient art of mnemonics, the science of telling time by the sun, did not simply vanish. Instead, it left a permanent imprint on the new technology. Look closely at the face of a medieval clock. Its circular design, with 12 equal hours marked around its perimeter, is a direct descendant of the sundial. The clock's hand sweeps in a circle, mimicking the sun's own apparent journey across the sky. Even the placement of these new timekeepers was a nod to solar tradition. Town planners often positioned the clock tower in the central square, ensuring its face was visible to the entire community, much like the castle's shadow clocks had once painted the time across the courtyard for all to see. The tower itself became a new kind of gnomon, its shadow marking the hours on the cobblestones below, a hybrid of ancient principle and modern mechanics. This created a fascinating bridge between two worlds. For generations, people lived with a dual sense of time. They would hear the clock strike the hour, yet still glance instinctively at the castle walls to see if the sun's shadow confirmed the machine's claim. The old solar rhythms, built into the very stone of their lives, were not easily erased by the sound of a bell. The mechanical clock offered convenience, but the sun's passage provided a deeper, cosmic reassurance. This transition marks a profound shift in human consciousness, a move from time that was observed as part of nature to time that was manufactured and measured by machine. The castle's secret language was not forgotten, but its voice grew quieter, waiting centuries for us to learn how to listen once more. Centuries of neglect and clumsy renovation almost erased this secret language for good. Many castles fell into ruin, their carefully aligned windows blocked, their significant stones buried under rubble, their celestial functions fading into myth. But the sun's memory is long, and a new generation of investigators is learning to listen. Armed not with theodolites and stone chisels but with laser scanners and sophisticated software, archaeologists are now decoding the castle's hidden chronology from the digital ether. The process begins with painstakingly creating a perfect three-dimensional model of a ruined site. Using laser scanning technology, they capture every contour of the remaining stonework, every angle of a window embrasure with millimeter precision. This digital twin becomes their laboratory. Then they feed this model into a specialized program that can simulate the sun's path across the sky for any day of the year, past, present, or future. The researchers become virtual time travelers. They can sit at the digital console and run the simulation for the summer solstice in the year 1300. They watch as the virtual sun, governed by the same immutable laws of astronomy the master masons understood, casts its digital light through the virtual windows of the castle. And then they wait for the magic to happen. When that simulated beam of light on that specific date lands perfectly on a surviving carved symbol or a documented foundation stone, it is a eureka moment. It confirms an intentional alignment, separating architectural genius from mere coincidence. This digital archaeology is rewriting our understanding of these structures. A window that seemed randomly placed is revealed to be a precise lunar marker. A strange protrusion on a wall, previously thought to be a broken statue base, is shown to cast a critical noon shadow. Each discovery is like finding a lost chapter in a great book, restoring the castle's voice and allowing it to tell its own time once more. This symbolic battle between light and dark was the very engine of the castle's design. For the medieval world, light was not just a physical phenomenon. It was the visible essence of God, a tangible expression of truth, reason, and cosmic harmony. Darkness, by contrast, was not merely an absence of light. It was a positive force of chaos, ignorance, and malevolence, the domain of evil spirits and moral confusion. When a master mason engineered a shaft of sunlight to pierce the gloom of a great hall, he was staging a miniature drama of salvation. He was demonstrating the Lord's God-given power to banish disorder and illuminate his realm with justice and truth. The castle, in its perfect alignment with the heavens, became a physical argument for a well-ordered universe. It was a model of how things should be, where celestial law governed earthly affairs. Every time the solstice sun blazed through the gatehouse, it was a reenactment of divine power flowing through the Lord's authority. When the thin beam of the winter sun found its mark deep inside the keep, it was a promise that light would always conquer the longest night. This symbolism infused every stone with meaning. The slow, predictable march of shadows across a floor was not just a clock. It was a visible demonstration that the universe operated according to a rational, divine plan, and that the Lord, by building his home within that plan, was its rightful earthly steward. His castle was more than a fortress. It was a sermon in stone, teaching everyone within its walls that their lives were part of a larger, meaningful cosmos where light would always, inevitably, triumph. This shared technological language reveals a fascinating duality in the medieval worldview. The very same principles of solar alignment that organized the military and agricultural life of a castle were simultaneously being used to orchestrate the sacred calendar within a cathedral. A master mason might spend his career moving between these two great building projects, applying his knowledge of the sun's path to serve both a king and a bishop. The tools were identical, a gnomon for tracing shadows, an astrolabe for measuring angles. The underlying geometry was the same precise mathematics, yet the intended outcome was profoundly different. In the castle, a beam of light striking a specific stone was a command to harvest grain or change the guard. In the cathedral, that same beam of light, falling upon the carved face of a saint or illuminating a particular biblical scene in a stained glass window, was a call to prayer, a moment of divine connection. It was a single science serving two separate spheres of power, the temporal and the eternal. Consider the famous Green Man, a pagan-looking foliate face often carved in the shadowy corners of a cathedral. To a casual observer, it might seem a strange, almost rebellious presence, but on the feast day of a specific saint, perhaps the patron of gardens or fertility, the rising sun could be engineered to pour through a distant window, its light landing directly on the Green Man's leaves, making them appear to glow with an unearthly life. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of theological storytelling, using light to baptize an ancient symbol into a new Christian narrative. The castle's chronology was about control and survival. The cathedral's was about revelation and worship. One marked the hour for closing the gates, the other the hour for opening one's soul to God. This comparison proves that the secret chronology was not a niche trick but a fundamental pillar of high medieval architecture. It was a universal language spoken in stone, understood by the powerful whether they ruled from a throne or a pulpit, weaving both fortress and church into the same cosmic rhythm. You do not need sophisticated equipment to begin searching for these secret solar markers. Start your own investigation by simply observing the shape of a window opening. A wide, welcoming window was for light and air, but a strangely narrow slit, perhaps only an inch or two wide and positioned with no obvious defensive or scenic purpose, is a prime suspect. These slender apertures were precision instruments, designed not for a broad view but to capture a single, specific beam of light. Next, train your eye to look for the evidence of that beam's passage. Scan the stone floors and the opposite walls for subtle, worn patches. A faint smoothing of the stone, a discoloration that seems too perfectly circular or linear to be random weathering, could be the centuries-old footprint of a daily or annual touch of sunlight. It is the ghost of a calendar etched into the rock by time itself. Pay close attention to the castle's primary axis. Stand in the center of the ruined Great Hall and face the main entrance. If you have a basic compass on your phone, note the direction. A hall aligned very close to east and west is a strong indicator of intentional solar design, meant to catch the rising or setting sun on the equinoxes. The most rewarding investigation requires a bit of planning. If you can arrange a visit on or near a solstice or an equinox, position yourself where you think a significant marker might be. As the sun climbs, watch with patience. Does a sliver of light, perhaps from that curious narrow window you noted earlier, slowly creep across the floor? Does it finally, triumphantly, land on a carved symbol, a specific stone, or the base of a pillar at the exact moment the sun reaches its peak? That moment of discovery is a direct conversation with the past. You are standing where a medieval watchman stood, witnessing the same celestial event that governed his life. This hands-on detective work transforms a ruin from a static monument into a living, breathing chronicle. It allows you to see with the eyes of the master mason, to understand his intentions not from a book, but from the silent, enduring testimony of stone and light. The silent conversation between a building and the sun did not end with the last stone laid on a medieval rampart. We are still speaking that language today, often without realizing it. The modern movement known as passive solar design, a cornerstone of sustainable architecture, is the direct intellectual heir of the master mason's craft. When a contemporary architect carefully angles a glass-walled house to soak up the low winter sun while shading it from the high, intense heat of summer, they are applying the very same principles of solar geometry. The goal has shifted from marking saints' days to reducing carbon footprints, but the fundamental understanding of the sun's path remains unchanged. This is not a rediscovery but a continuation. We have simply replaced the carved meridian line with a thermally massive concrete floor that absorbs the sun's warmth by day and radiates it back through the cool night. The castle's strategic window slit, designed to capture one perfect beam, finds its echo in the precisely calculated overhang of a modern roof. That overhang is not an aesthetic choice. It is a calibrated instrument, calculated to block the high summer sun completely while allowing the full, warming glare of the winter sun to penetrate deep into the living space. This transforms our view of the medieval castle. It was not merely a fortress or a calendar. It was a highly sophisticated climate control system, engineered for comfort and efficiency centuries before the invention of the thermostat. Its thick stone walls acted as a thermal battery, slowly absorbing heat and releasing it to moderate indoor temperatures, a principle we now call thermal mass. The castle's deliberate orientation was its first and most important line of defense against the elements, long before any arrow slit came into play. This ancient wisdom, born from necessity and refined through observation, offers a profound lesson. In our rush toward high-tech solutions for energy efficiency, we are learning that some of the most powerful technologies are those that work in silent partnership with the natural world. The castle's legacy is a blueprint for a sustainable future, written not in silicon chips but in sunlight and stone. Some might dismiss these alignments as happy accidents of construction. After all, building a straight wall is simpler than a crooked one, and windows are naturally placed to face the sun. But coincidence cannot explain the consistent, specific patterns found across hundreds of miles and hundreds of years. A castle in Scotland and a fortress in France, built by different rulers for different purposes, might both feature a gatehouse perfectly aligned to the summer solstice sunrise. When this same feature appears again and again, in structures separated by vast distances, the likelihood of random chance evaporates. The evidence moves beyond individual stones to a pattern of thought, a shared architectural language spoken by the master masons of Europe. Historical records from the secretive masons' lodges, the guild halls where these craftsmen guarded their knowledge, further cement this conclusion. These manuscripts speak not just of structural loads and mortar mixes, but of the right light and the proper angle for certain feast days. They contain diagrams that map solar paths onto building plans, proving that the alignment was a deliberate part of the design process from the very first sketch on parchment. Of course, not every castle was a perfect celestial observatory. Some were built in haste under threat of war, their primary function purely military. Others have been so heavily altered over the centuries that their original alignments are lost, but the pattern that emerges from the ones that remain is undeniable. It reveals a tradition, not a series of flukes. This was a sophisticated, intentional fusion of astronomy and architecture, a quiet testament to a time when humanity saw its daily life as intimately woven into the grand tapestry of the heavens. The true magic of these stone calendars lies not in mystery but in mathematics. The silent language of the shadows was one of profound ingenuity, a testament to a world deeply connected to the cosmic rhythms we often overlook. These castles were far more than fortresses. They were living entities breathing in sync with the sun and moon, their very stones pulsing with the heartbeat of the hours and the seasons. From the Solsticial Gateway to the whispering window slit in the private chamber, from the spiral staircase's helical sundial to the battlement's public clock face, time was not just kept. It was literally built into the landscape, governing the lives of everyone from the lord to the farmer. This journey reveals a medieval world that was astonishingly advanced, its master masons acting as both engineers and astronomers. They left behind a legacy not of crude strength but of elegant intelligence, so the next time you walk among old stones, I encourage you to look with new eyes. See the shadows not as an absence of light, but as messages from the past, waiting for a patient observer to read their story. If this exploration of hidden history has captivated you, consider subscribing for more journeys into the secrets of the medieval world. We would love to hear your thoughts on these architectural marvels in the comments below.